The shuttle dropped through Verdania's thick atmosphere with Captain Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Crawford, Amy Walsh, and Carlos Martinez aboard. Lieutenant Katie Sullivan piloted the craft with steady hands, weaving between massive tree branches that reached toward the sky like living towers. "Captain, these trees are enormous," Katie said as she guided the shuttle toward the landing coordinates Elder Lyra had provided. "Some of them must be over 1,000 feet tall." Amy Walsh pressed her face to the window, watching the jungle pass below them. "Those aren't just trees, Katie. Look at the patterns in the growth. Someone has been shaping them for generations." Then they descended. The true scale of Silvani civilization became clear. What had looked like random jungle from orbit was actually a carefully designed city. Bridges made of woven branches connected tree platforms, and streams of water flowed through, channels carved into living wood. Gardens hung in the air, supported by networks of vines that pulsed with soft light. The shuttle landed on a platform that had grown specifically to receive it. The moment they stepped outside, the humans felt the difference in this world. The air itself seemed alive, carrying scents and sounds that spoke of deep harmony between all living things. Elder Lyra waited for them with several other Silvani. Up close, the humans could see that the aliens were more integrated with their environment than any species they had ever encountered. Small plants grew from their skin like natural decorations, and their eyes reflected the green light that flowed through the jungle networks. "Welcome to Verdania, Captain Morrison," Elder Lyra said. "I must warn you, the dead zones are spreading faster now. We may have only days before the network collapses completely." Dr. Crawford opened her medical scanner and began taking readings. "Elder Lyra, may I examine one of the affected areas? I need to understand how this plague works." "Of course, Doctor. But first, you must understand what you are trying to save." Elder Lyra led them to a grove where young Silvani were tending to seedlings. As the humans watched, the children placed their hands on small plants and whispered to them. The plants responded by growing taller, changing color, and developing new types of leaves. "This is impossible," Carlos whispered. "They're controlling plant growth with their minds." "Not controlling," corrected a young Silvani girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. "We ask, and they listen. All life wants to grow and help. We just show them how." Amy Walsh knelt down beside the girl. "Can you teach me?" The child smiled and took Amy's hand, placing it on a small flower. "Feel its life, human Amy. Every plant has a song. Can you hear it?" Amy closed her eyes and concentrated. At first, she felt nothing but the texture of petals under her fingers. Then, slowly, she began to sense something else, a warmth, a presence, something that felt like the plant was aware of her touch. "I think I can feel something," Amy said softly. "Good," the girl said. "Now ask it to grow taller." Amy tried to form the thought, to somehow communicate with the plant. Nothing happened for several seconds, then the flower began to stretch upward, adding an inch to its stem. "My God," Amy breathed. It actually worked. Dr. Crawford had been taking readings throughout the demonstration. "Captain, the energy patterns I'm detecting suggest these people are using some form of biological quantum entanglement. They're literally connected to the planetary ecosystem at a subatomic level." Elder Lyra nodded approvingly. "Your Dr. Crawford understands quickly. Yes, we are part of Verdania's life network. Through us, every plant, every animal, every microorganism can communicate and coordinate. This is how we have maintained perfect ecological balance for over 10,000 years." Katie Sullivan, who had remained skeptical of what she called plant magic, found herself drawn to a massive tree at the center of the grove. Something about it called to her, and before she realized what she was doing, she had placed both hands on its bark. The moment her skin touched the tree, Katie's world exploded with sensation. She felt the tree's roots extending deep into the earth, connecting with thousands of other trees across vast distances. She sensed the flow of nutrients and information through underground networks that spanned continents. She experienced the slow, ancient thoughts of a forest that had been growing and learning for millennia. But she also felt pain. Somewhere in the network, connections were breaking. Plants were screaming as they died, their voices cut off in mid-song. The plague was like acid, dissolving the bonds between living things and leaving only silence where once there had been harmony. Katie jerked her hands away from the tree, gasping. I felt it dying. The whole network is in agony. Elder Lyra's expression was grave. Now you understand what we face. The plague doesn't just kill plants. It kills the connections between all living things. It turns a world-spanning consciousness into isolated, dying fragments. Dr. Crawford studied her scanner readings with growing alarm. Captain, this isn't just a biological weapon. It's specifically designed to attack the neural pathways that connect the Sylvani to their ecosystem. Someone studied their biology and created a plague that would target their greatest strength. Carlos Martinez had been examining the dead zone boundaries with his engineering equipment. Captain, I found something disturbing. The plague spreads in perfect geometric patterns. This level of precision doesn't happen naturally. Someone is controlling its expansion. Jake felt his anger building as the picture became clearer. They're not just trying to kill the Sylvani. They're trying to break them psychologically by making them watch their world die slowly. 17 species received our distress calls, Elder Lyra said quietly. 17 different peoples who could have helped us. All refused because they said we had nothing valuable to offer them. Amy Walsh looked up from where she was still practicing with the plants. They were wrong. What you have here is the most advanced biotechnology in the galaxy. The applications for medicine, agriculture, environmental restoration. But only if they understood it, Dr. Crawford finished. Most species would see your integration with nature as primitive, because it doesn't look like their metal and plastic technology. Katie Sullivan wiped tears from her eyes, still shaken by her connection to the dying network. How long do we have before the collapse becomes irreversible? Elder Lyra consulted with the other Sylvani through some form of silent communication. Perhaps 6 days. Once the network breaks apart completely, it will take generations to rebuild, assuming any of us survive the disconnection. Jake looked around at his team. They were explorers and scientists, not miracle workers. But they were also humans, and humans had a talent for finding solutions that others missed. Elder Lyra, we're going to need access to the plague samples and complete information about your bio-network. Carlos, I want you working with their engineers to understand their technology. Amy, learn everything you can about their plant communications. Lisa, figure out exactly how this plague works. And me, Captain? Asked Katie. Jake smiled grimly. You're going to learn to talk to trees, Lieutenant, because I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the Aurora, staring at the strange signal on his screen. The message was weak and broken, coming from a planet that most people had forgotten about. Verdania was its name, a green world covered in thick jungles that nobody cared about anymore. Captain, we're getting another burst of that signal, said Lieutenant Amy Walsh from her station. She was the ship's plant expert, always excited about new worlds they might find. Her brown hair was tied back, and her eyes showed the kind of curiosity that made her good at her job. Jake looked at the data again. The signal was asking for help, but it was so old that most ships would have ignored it by now. 3 months had passed since the first message reached human space. The Galactic Coalition had received it too, but they had marked it as low priority and filed it away. Sir, the Coalition database shows 17 different species received this distress call, reported Commander Ben Torres from his position near the communications array. Ben was Jake's second in command, a steady man who never missed important details. None of them responded. Dr. Lisa Crawford looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life, and she had been studying the signal patterns for days. Captain, there's something strange about this message. The language patterns suggest these aliens are more advanced than the Coalition reports indicate. Jake stood up and walked to the main viewing screen. The stars looked the same as always, but somewhere out there was a world calling for help that nobody wanted to answer. He had read the Coalition files on Verdania. They called the people there jungle girls because the dominant species was female-led and lived in the forests. The report said they were primitive, using simple tools and living in trees like animals. "Captain Morrison, permission to speak freely?" asked Dr. Crawford. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that could solve problems others couldn't see. "Go ahead, Doctor." "I've been comparing this distress signal to other communications from pre-contact civilizations. The mathematical concepts embedded in the transmission are actually quite sophisticated. I think the coalition may have misunderstood what they were looking at." Carlos Martinez, the ship's engineer, turned from his station. He was young but skilled, the kind of person who could fix anything if you gave him enough time. "Captain, I've been tracking the signal's origin point. It's not coming from just one location on the planet. The transmission is being broadcast from multiple points across the entire surface. That suggests a planet-wide communication network." Jake considered this information. The Aurora was an exploration ship, designed to investigate new worlds and make first contact with alien species. They were supposed to follow coalition guidelines, but those guidelines also said they should help species in distress. The problem was that helping often meant paperwork, delays, and questions from bureaucrats who had never left their offices. "What's our current mission status?" Jake asked Ben. "We're between assignments, sir. The next scheduled exploration isn't for 2 weeks. We have supplies and fuel for extended operations." Amy Walsh looked excited. "Captain, if there really is a planet-wide ecosystem crisis, this could be the discovery of a lifetime. Most worlds don't develop that kind of integrated communication system." Jake had served in the human space fleet for 15 years. He had seen how the coalition worked. Big species with powerful militaries got attention and resources. Small species that couldn't offer anything valuable got ignored. Humans were somewhere in the middle, useful enough to keep around, but not important enough to have a real voice in decisions. "Dr. Crawford, what kind of crisis do you think they're facing?" Jake asked. Lisa studied her readings again. The signal mentions something destroying their world's life systems. Based on the urgency patterns in the language, I'd estimate they have maybe months before whatever is happening becomes irreversible. "And no one else is coming to help," Ben said quietly. Jake looked around at his crew. These were good people, the kind who had joined the space fleet because they wanted to explore and help others, not because they wanted power or wealth. The Aurora had a crew of 43 humans, most of them young and eager to make a difference in the galaxy. "Carlos, how long would it take us to reach Verdania?" "At maximum sustainable speed, about 8 days, Captain." "And our supply situation?" "We're fully stocked. Food for 3 months, medical supplies for standard operations, and enough fuel for a round trip with 2 weeks of orbital operations." Jake made his decision. "Set course for Verdania. Amy, I want you to study everything we have about the planet's ecosystem. Lisa, learn everything you can about these jungle girls from the coalition files, but don't assume the files are accurate. Ben, prepare the crew for possible first contact scenarios." The bridge became busy as everyone moved to carry out their orders. Jake sat back down in his captain's chair and looked at the distress signal still flashing on his screen. Maybe the coalition was right, and this was just a waste of time and resources. Maybe the Silvani really were primitive and couldn't offer anything useful in return for help. But Jake had learned something important during his years in space. Sometimes the most valuable discoveries came from the places everyone else ignored. And sometimes helping others was the right thing to do, even when you couldn't see what you might gain from it. The Aurora turned toward Verdania, carrying the only hope that world had seen in months. 8 days later, the Aurora dropped out of hyperspace near Verdania. The planet appeared on the main screen like a green jewel against the black of space. Thick clouds swirled around continents covered in dense jungle, and 3 small moons orbited the world in perfect harmony. "My God," whispered Amy Walsh as she studied the sensor readings. "Captain, the biodiversity readings are off the charts. This planet has more different life forms than any world in the Coalition database." Dr. Lisa Crawford worked at her station, running deep scans of the planet's surface. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures that don't match any known technology. The patterns are organic, almost like the planet itself is alive." Captain Jake Morrison studied the data flowing across his screens. The distress signals were still broadcasting, but now they could see where they came from. Points of light scattered across the planet's surface showed a communication network that spanned continents. Commander Torres, take us into orbit. Standard, first contact protocols, Jake ordered. Ben Torres nodded and began coordinating with the navigation team. As the Aurora moved closer to Verdania, the sensors picked up more details. What they found made everyone on the bridge stop and stare. "Captain, those aren't cities down there," reported Lisa. "The structures are growing directly out of the trees. The buildings are alive." Through the main viewer, they could see settlements that looked like they had been shaped rather than built. Massive trees formed the framework of communities. Their branches woven together to create platforms and walkways hundreds of feet above the ground. Rivers of light flowed through the organic architecture, pulsing like veins in a living body. "Sir, I'm getting responses to our arrival," said the communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Carter. He was young and eager, the kind of officer who never missed a detail. "Multiple sources are trying to establish contact. The signals are complex, using mathematical concepts I've never seen before." Amy Walsh looked up from her station with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, I need to get down there. What I'm seeing shouldn't be possible. They've somehow integrated their technology with the planet's ecosystem. The entire jungle appears to be one massive interconnected organism." "Dr. Crawford, what's your assessment of the crisis they're facing?" Jake asked. Lisa's expression was grim as she studied the incoming data. "Captain, something is killing the network. I'm detecting dead zones spreading across the planet's surface. Whatever is causing this, it's moving fast. The affected areas show complete biological breakdown." Commander Torres finished his orbit calculations and turned to face Jake. "Sir, we're being hailed. The communication is coming from the largest settlement on the southern continent. Put it through, Lieutenant Carter." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The being appeared humanoid, but distinctly feminine, with green-tinted skin and large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Vines and small flowers grew in her hair as if they were part of her body. "Greetings, travelers from the stars," the alien said through the universal translator. Her voice carried sadness and desperate hope. "I am Elder Lyra of the Silvani people. You are the first to answer our call for help." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Aurora. We received your distress signal. What can we do to help?" Elder Lyra's eyes showed surprise. "Human? We have not heard of your species, but you came when no others would. Our world is dying, Captain Morrison. A sickness spreads through our network, turning life into death. We have asked 17 different peoples for aid. All refused." Dr. Crawford moved closer to the screen. "Elder Lyra, I'm Dr. Lisa Crawford. Can you tell us more about this sickness? When did it start?" 3 seasons ago, Dr. Crawford. It began in the northern forests where strange metal things fell from the sky. The sickness eats at the connection between all living things. Where it passes, the great network dies, and with it, our people." Carlos. Martinez stepped into view from his engineering station. "Elder, these metal things that fell from the sky, can you describe them?" "They were small, no larger than a person's hand, but when they touched the ground, they released something that cannot be seen. This invisible poison spreads through our network, breaking the bonds that have connected all life on Verdania for thousands of years." Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. "Elder Lyra, do you know where these objects came from?" "We detected ships in our outer system, but they left before we could make contact. The objects appeared shortly after." Ben Torres checked his tactical displays. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures consistent with hegemony stealth technology. This wasn't an accident." Lisa Crawford's face went pale. "Captain, if this is a biological weapon designed to attack planetary ecosystems, then Verdania isn't the first target. The hegemony has been testing this on worlds the Coalition considers unimportant." Elder Lyra continued speaking, her voice heavy with loss. "Each day, more of our network dies. Our children can no longer hear the songs of the trees. Our healers cannot call upon the plant medicines that have sustained us. We are becoming disconnected from the world that gave us life. Amy Walsh stepped forward. Elder Lyra, we want to help, but we need to understand your technology better. How does your network function? It is not technology as others might understand it, Elder Lyra explained. We are part of Verdania, and Verdania is part of us. Through touch and thought, we guide the growth of all living things. Plants grow where we need them. Medicines develop when we call for them, and information flows through the network faster than any machine could carry it. Jake understood now why the Coalition had dismissed the Sylvani as primitive. They weren't using metal and circuits and engines. They were using something far more advanced, something that most species couldn't even recognize as technology. Elder Lyra, we're going to send down a landing party to learn more about the situation. Will you permit us to visit your world? Captain Morrison, you and your people are welcome. We will share all we know if it might help save what remains of our world. As the communication ended, Jake looked around at his crew. They had found a civilization more advanced than anything in the Coalition, and it was being murdered by an empire that saw living worlds as obstacles to strip mining operations. Ben, prepare a landing party. Amy, Lisa, Carlos, you're with me. We're going to find out exactly what the hegemony did to this planet, and then we're going to fix it. The integration began at dawn on the fourth day. Captain Helen Brooks brought her ships down through Verdania's atmosphere, their hulls glowing as Sylvani bioengineers guided special vines to connect with the human vessels. What happened next amazed everyone who witnessed it. The Aurora was the first ship to undergo the transformation. As living cables merged with its quantum computers, the ship's metal hull began to change. Organic patterns spread across its surface like veins of light, and the vessel's systems started communicating directly with the planetary network. Captain Morrison, this is incredible, reported Dr. Patricia Moore from the mobile laboratory ship. She was Helen Brooks' science officer, a woman who had studied alien technology for 20 years but had never seen anything like this. The ship's computer is learning to think like a living organism. Carlos Martinez monitored the process from the Aurora's bridge, which now pulsed with gentle green light. Captain, our ship is becoming part of the network, but it's still completely under our control. It's like having a conversation with a very intelligent friend. Amy Walsh stood in the center of the bridge, her hands pressed against a wall that had grown soft and warm to the touch. Through her connection, she could feel the hybrid network spreading across the planet. Captain, the integration is working. The plague can't adapt to our technology because it doesn't understand how human computers think. Dr. Lisa Crawford worked frantically at her station, now a living console that grew data displays like flowers. The hybrid network is creating quantum barriers around the infected areas. The plague is contained and starting to retreat. Elder Lyra's voice came through the ship's communication system, but now it sounded like she was speaking from within the walls themselves. Captain Morrison, the healing has begun. Our network is growing strong again, protected by your human technology. Katie Sullivan piloted the Aurora through Verdania's atmosphere, but now the ship moved with an organic grace that felt completely natural. Captain, I can feel the wind currents like they're part of me. The ship wants to fly in harmony with the planet's weather patterns. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. Alex Thompson, the tactical officer on Captain Brooks's command ship, reported through the network. All ships, Hegemony fleet dropping out of hyperspace. 12 cruisers and 1 dreadnought, just as predicted. Jake looked at the main display, which now showed the approaching enemy ships through the eyes of plants and animals across the planet's surface. The Hegemony vessels were massive and threatening, designed for destroying worlds rather than exploring them. Captain Brooks, are your ships ready for combat? Jake asked through the hybrid communication system. As ready as we can be, Jake. But we're outnumbered 4-1. Commander Admiral Kane, the Hegemony fleet leader, broadcast a message to the planet's surface. His voice was cold and mechanical, processed through military translation systems that removed all emotion. Attention, primitive species. You will evacuate this world immediately. This planet has been designated for mineral extraction. Any resistance will be eliminated. Elder Lyra responded through the planetary network. her words carried by every plant and animal on Verdania. "This is our home, Admiral Kane. We will not abandon it to your destruction." "Then you have chosen extinction," Kane replied. "All ships begin bombardment of population centers." The hegemony fleet opened fire, sending massive energy beams toward Verdania's surface. But something unexpected happened. The planet itself began to defend against the attack. The hybrid network had turned Verdania into a living shield. Plants across entire continents moved in perfect coordination, growing dense barriers that absorbed and deflected the energy weapons. The jungle itself fought back, sending concentrated bursts of bioelectric energy toward the attacking ships. "My God," whispered Dr. Moore. "The planet is defending itself." Amy Walsh felt the planetary consciousness surge with determination and hope. "It's not just defending, it's learning. Every attack makes the network stronger." The human ships now, fully integrated with the bio-network, moved through space with impossible grace. They dodged enemy fire while the planet guided their movements, and their weapons charged with bioelectric energy that the hegemony shields couldn't absorb. Jake watched as the Aurora fired at a hegemony cruiser, but instead of simple energy beams, the weapon sent streams of living light that ate through the enemy ship's hull like acid. "Carlos, what just happened?" "Captain, our weapons are using bioenergy now. They're designed to break down synthetic materials while leaving organic matter unharmed." The battle turned quickly. The hegemony ships, built for fighting metal vessels, with predictable tactics, couldn't adapt to enemies that fought like living organisms. Their weapons couldn't penetrate the planet's organic defenses, while the hybrid ship struck with precision that seemed almost magical. Within 2 hours, the hegemony fleet was either destroyed or retreating. Admiral Kane's dreadnought, its hull, eaten away by bioenergy weapons, limped toward the edge of the system while broadcasting emergency surrender signals. "Admiral Kane," Jake said through the communication system. "This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Aurora. Verdania is under the protection of the Human-Sylvani Alliance. Any further attacks on this world or its people will be considered acts of war against both our species." Kane's response was filled with shock and confusion. "This is impossible. The Coalition reported these aliens as primitive. How did they possess such advanced technology?" Elder Lyra answered for herself. "Because you never bothered to understand us, Admiral. You saw only what you expected to see." In the weeks that followed, word of the Human-Sylvani Alliance spread throughout the galaxy. Other species that had been ignored or dismissed by the Coalition began reaching out to humanity, seeking the same kind of partnership that had saved Verdania. The Aurora, now a hybrid bioship that could heal itself and grow stronger with each journey, became the flagship of a new exploration fleet. Captain Jake Morrison found himself not just exploring new worlds, but helping to build bridges between species that had never learned to trust each other. Dr. Crawford established the first interspecies research facility on Verdania, where human scientists worked alongside Sylvani bioengineers to develop technologies that neither species could have created alone. Amy Walsh became the first human to fully integrate with a planetary consciousness, serving as an ambassador between biological and mechanical forms of life. The Coalition suddenly discovered that their human members had become far more valuable than anyone had realized. Worlds that had been written off as unimportant were revealed to possess technologies and knowledge that could reshape galactic civilization. As Jake stood on the bridge of the Aurora, watching Verdania's green surface through eyes that were both human and alien, he realized that humanity had found something more valuable than any treasure. They had found their place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or subjects, but as the species that helped others find their strength. The Jungle Girls of Verdania were no longer alone, and neither were the humans who had chosen to help them. Dr. Lisa Crawford worked through the night in the Sylvani Biolaboratory, studying samples of the plague under both human microscopes and living Sylvani analysis systems. The alien lab was unlike anything she had ever seen. Instead of metal tables and glass containers, everything was grown from specialized plants that could examine other organisms at the cellular level. "Captain Morrison, I think I've found something important," Lisa called out as Jake entered the lab. She was exhausted but excited, her hair messy from hours of intense work. "What did you discover, Doctor?" "The plague is brilliant and terrible at the same time. It's not actually killing the plants directly. Instead, it's corrupting the quantum entanglement frequencies that allow the Sylvani to communicate with their ecosystem. It's like jamming a radio signal, but at the subatomic level." Jake studied the data she was showing him on a living display that grew from the wall like a flower. "Can we block the jamming signal?" "That's the problem. The plague adapts. Every time the Sylvani network tries to work around it, the plague changes its frequency to match. It's learning faster than they can adapt." Carlos Martinez looked up from where he was working with a Sylvani engineer named Thane. They had spent days trying to understand how the bio-network functioned, and Carlos was amazed by what he had learned. "Captain, these people don't use computers the way we do," Carlos explained. "Their entire civilization runs on living networks that can grow, heal themselves, and evolve in real time. But that same flexibility is what makes them vulnerable to this plague." Amy Walsh entered the lab covered in pollen and plant sap. She had been working with Sylvani children, learning to communicate with the jungle network. Her progress had been faster than anyone expected. "Captain, I can talk to the plants now," Amy said with wonder in her voice. "Not just simple commands, but actual conversations. They have memories going back thousands of years. They remember when the first metal objects fell from the sky." "What do they remember about the attack?" Jake asked. Amy closed her eyes, touching a vine that hung from the ceiling. "The plants say the metal objects released something that felt like screaming. It hurt to be near them, and the hurt spread from plant to plant through the network. They tried to isolate the affected areas, but the screaming got louder and reached farther each day." Lieutenant Katie Sullivan rushed into the lab, her face flushed with excitement. "Captain, I just got word from the Aurora. We have company incoming." Jake's expression hardened. "Hegemony ships?" "No, sir, human ships. 3 vessels under Captain Helen Brooks from the Exploration Fleet. They received our emergency transmission and came to help." Dr. Crawford looked confused. "Captain, we never sent an emergency transmission." "Did," Jake admitted. 2 days ago, when I realized the scope of what we were dealing with, I violated coalition protocols and called for human backup." Carlos grinned. "Good thing you did, Captain. I've been thinking about this plague problem, and I have an idea that's going to need more resources than we have." Jake looked around at his team. They had all been working without sleep, driven by the knowledge that an entire world was dying around them. "What's your idea, Carlos?" "The plague adapts because it's designed to learn from biological systems. But what if we gave it something it wasn't designed to handle? What if we combined human quantum computing with Sylvani bio-networks?" Thane, the Sylvani engineer, made a sound that the translator rendered as thoughtful consideration. "Your electronic systems process information differently than our living networks. The plague might not know how to adapt to hybrid technology." Dr. Crawford caught on immediately. "We could create a firewall using human technology to protect the biological components, while the bio-network heals itself, like putting a shield around a patient while their immune system fights off an infection." Amy Walsh was already connecting with the plant network, sharing the idea with the planetary consciousness. "The plants are excited about this. They say, it feels like the solution they've been hoping for." Katie Sullivan pulled up tactical displays on her portable unit. "Captain, the human reinforcements will be here in 6 hours. Captain Brooks is bringing 2 engineering ships and a mobile laboratory. But we have another problem." "What problem?" "Long-range sensors are detecting a hegemony fleet moving toward Verdania. 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. They'll arrive in 18 hours. Jake felt the familiar calm that came before battle. They're coming to finish the job. They want to make sure their plague completes the destruction before anyone can stop it. Elder Lyra entered the lab, moving with the grace that came from a lifetime of harmony with the natural world. Captain Morrison, our network has been monitoring your conversations. We understand that you are risking much to help us. Elder Lyra, my people believe that helping others is never a risk. It's an opportunity. Your words give us hope, but you should know that the plague has accelerated its spread. We now have perhaps 4 days before total network collapse. Carlos looked up from his calculations. Elder, what would happen if we could create a stable hybrid network, one that combined human technology with your biosystems? Such a thing has never been attempted. The integration would require perfect trust between our species and yours. Your machines would need to become part of our living network, and our network would need to accept your technology as natural. Amy Walsh smiled. Elder Lyra, I think trust is something humans are good at. Dr. Crawford began gathering her equipment. We'll need to start immediately. The hybrid network will take time to grow and stabilize. Doctor, we don't have time for a gradual approach, Jake said. Carlos, can your hybrid system be deployed quickly across the entire planet? Carlos thought. For a moment. If we use the human ships as network nodes and connect them to the Silvani biogrid, we could create a planet-wide hybrid system in hours instead of days. But it would mean integrating our ships directly into their living network. Katie Sullivan raised an eyebrow. You're talking about turning our ships into part of a living organism. Not just part of it, Amy said with growing excitement. Partners with it. The ships would become alive, able to heal themselves and grow stronger over time. Jake made his decision. Do it. Contact Captain Brooks and tell her we're going to need her ships for something unprecedented. Elder Lyra, are your people willing to accept human technology as part of your network? Elder Lyra communicated silently with the planetary consciousness for several moments. When she looked back at Jake, her eyes held a deep warmth. Captain Morrison Verdania has voted. Your species will be welcomed into our network as true partners. Together, we will face whatever comes. As alarms began sounding throughout the settlement, indicating the approach of the human reinforcement fleet, Jake felt a surge of hope. They were about to attempt something that had never been done before, combining two completely different forms of technology into a single hybrid system. If it worked, they would save a world and create a new kind of partnership between species. If it failed, both humans and Silvani would face the hegemony fleet with nothing but courage and determination. But Jake had learned something important during his years in space. Sometimes the most impossible solutions were the ones that worked best.